Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions. Everything I talk about really is self-regulation. And that's a specific focus for today, even though it's something that I talk about every day, pretty much. But the reason I focus so much on self-regulation is because that's at the heart of everything that we do, right? Everything as we do, even as adults, as humans. It's how we manage our feelings. It's how we meet expectations. It's how we build relationships. It's how we move towards goals that we've set for ourselves that are meaningful. Today, though, I really want to look at establishing goal-directed behavior and the framework to help with that specifically. Self-regulation, when we often hear about it, talk about it, we think about just helping kids calm down, regulate their emotions, or behave appropriately. But it's really actually the ongoing ability to manage everything related to our thoughts, our emotions, our actions in service of some goal. What is that goal? Maybe it's cleaning up after dinner without being asked. Maybe it's solving a tricky math problem. Maybe it's not losing it when my sibling is annoying the heck out of me. Okay, so whatever the goal is, it doesn't matter. It's being able to manage ourselves to reach that goal. Now, when we have kiddos who struggle with self-regulation, and a lot of kids these days really have a hard time with that self-regulation, it can often look like defiance. It can look like procrastination, like they're not motivated enough, they're lazy. Maybe it looks like emotional outbursts. There's so many different ways that that self-regulation piece looks like. But underneath, what's really happening is they're having a difficulty towards directing their behavior towards that specific outcome, especially if that outcome's not immediately rewarding, if it's competing with their own internal goals. So maybe like finishing a video game instead of getting ready for school, which is, what other people want them to be doing. And so that's why I want to talk through how we can help kids build this self-regulation framework that's really rooted in that goal-directed behavior, because that's, a piece of the missing link here. Now, they will have their own goals, of course, and maybe we want to start there. What are your goals? If they're having trouble reaching those goals in an adaptive way. But the focus today is really in helping them establish this framework so that they can meet everyday expectations. But it's usually helpful to start with a goal that they have. For example, my daughter right now is learning to get her learner's license. And so there's studying, there's a test that's involved. And so this is great. As much as I always say to my girls, I'm an expert. I can help you with study strategies and learning and all of these things. And they never listen. But now maybe I can help teach some of this process through helping her get to write her learner's tests and be successful, because there is a lot of studying that needs to be done. So, we want to capitalize on those things when they're already interested in. But there is a bit of a process here, and it's really about understanding, from us, understanding where they're at, and lots of patience from us too, because self-regulation, it's not just one skill that we're just teaching self-regulation. It's a bunch of executive skills that can be really hard, because that executive part of our brain is the last to develop. And it's really tricky for our tweens and teenagers because there's a lot going on in the brain. And so it's really hard because of the fact that that's the last part of their brain to develop. And it's frustrating for us adults because we have that developed brain, and our brain is able to communicate and better able to self-regulate. Although I would say for a lot of adults, that can still be tricky. So it's not just one skill. I mean, there's so many pieces. There's planning, there's organization, there's being able to break things down and take those steps to complete that task in that planning and organization. There's cognitive flexibility. Even within that, there's lots of different things like being able to shift gears, identify things aren't working and shift gears when the plan isn't working, and then figuring out what do I need to do from there. Working memory, where we have to hold the goal in mind and the steps that we need to do. What is our plan? And all of those steps to get there, to get to the goal, and managing all of the distractions. We have to have inhibitory control. So that's resisting impulses, right? That, oh, this is too hard. I just want to go play my video game. So resisting those impulses, staying focused on the task at hand. There's self-monitoring, right? Tracking how things are going in real time, noticing if we're making a mistake, and being able to adjust accordingly. So there's lots of skills. Those are just a few. And it's not that they just click into place. They tend to develop very unevenly, right? So some things might be easier, other things might be harder. And like I said, they're the last to develop. And so that's why they really need explicit support, explicit modeling, not just vague instructions like try harder, focus better, right? That's not going to be helpful. So that's why we have to be patient, and that's why we have to be really understanding of where their brain development is so that we can sort of help lay that foundation of goal-directed behavior, which is knowing what's expected in the first place. We often overlook this step about what's expected, and then we take it for granted because it sounds really simple, right? But oftentimes expectations are really invisible to kids. I actually remember I don't know if it was quadratic equations or polynomials, but it was something tricky in math, right? And my daughter is fairly good at math, my older one. And when we're studying through exams, we're like, okay, let's look at this YouTube video, or we'll look up YouTube videos of someone how to explain just this piece because there was just a piece. Her teacher couldn't explain it to her in a way that made sense. Her textbook, like everyone just seemed to gloss over this step. But even in YouTube videos, like math people they just assume like, oh, long division. Yeah, you just take the 6 and divide it into the 42 and and then you go on to the next number from there. Well, okay, what are all of the little individual steps in between? Like that's kind of, how it was kind of coming across. So oftentimes those in between pieces are really invisible to kids, even though it's so obvious to us. Another great example, a video that I often share when I'm doing my PD sessions and my workshops. There's a teacher who's explaining how to line up with kids. And I mean, we're talking grade 4, grade 5 kids. They're smart kids. They know how to line up at the door, but there's things that we don't think about, right? Like you should be facing the front. You should be behind somebody. There's always somebody in front of you. Your hands aren't touching anything. They're to your side, right? You're standing upright. You're not leaning over. Like little things that, yes, they're smart, but yes, we almost need to break things down so it's very explicit. Because when we're using that very vague language, be good, be nice, be respectful, do your work, well, what does that actually mean? And so that's why knowing very clearly what the expectation is in the first place, that's the foundation. So we're using very concrete, literal language. We're using it in developmentally appropriate ways with developmentally appropriate examples and identifying, in different settings, maybe there's different expectations. So, what does being ready for school look like? How do I know what that looks like? We can say, go get ready for school, but for a lot of our kids, they forget. Even our 17-year-olds will forget some step about what being ready looks like. What does doing your part during group work look like? What does it sound like? What is, having being respectful in a disagreement when you're talking with your sibling? What does that sound like? And what does that look like? Right? Even doing your homework, what does that look like? There's so many steps in doing our homework for remembering what the homework is in the first place, being able to bring everything home, but even handing it in on time. There's lots of little steps that go into that. Visual anchors can be really helpful. Maybe it's checklists, maybe it's rubrics, maybe it's visual schedules. That can be really helpful to make things very explicit. Pictures are usually better than words because words, it's like, yeah, 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 and they're going to miss a step. But if they see a picture, right, I'm usually telling, like with younger kids, lay everything out, everything that they need to take to school, lay it out. Pull out everything in their backpack, their lunch kit, their agenda, whatever they need, take a picture. But even high school kids, maybe they need, in math, they need their calculator. In science, they might need, certain materials. I don't know. Take it all out, take a picture. Now they've got that visual that they can see. My girls, ringette gear. I can't tell you how many times that they've forgotten their skates. They'll be looking. I can see them looking in their bag. Yep, 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 yep. I've got all my equipment. And then we go to the rink and they don't got their skates. That's like the number one important piece of equipment. So having that picture, yep, check, check, check. I can see it. that can be really helpful. So even, what does being ready look like in the morning? Maybe that's, smiling, put a little sparkle on their teeth to remind them like it's sparkling teeth, my hair is brushed, right? Having that visual, oh yeah, that's the step that I need. We want to also incorporate I can statements to frame those actions as within their control. So for example, I can check my work before submitting it, right? I can get ready and go through my list all on my own independently. I don't know, whatever I can is. Depending on what the expectation is, we might even want to throw in some practice or role play, or maybe we're having a collaborative discussion about what that expectation would look like, whether it's at home, whether it's at school, maybe it's with friends, how we're interacting with friends. So we want to be really clear. And sometimes having examples and non-examples can be helpful. I think of Papa Bear off of Bernstein Bears, right? He's usually teaching his kids what not to do. This is a non-example. So being very explicit that way. So once we have a very clear expectation, now we can break that task into manageable steps. So if you're having a hard time getting started on something, it's usually because the first step is still too big. And this is definitely true for our kids as well. So we want to break it down. And maybe we got to break it down again until they're like, oh, yeah, I got it. Write a paragraph. Ah, too big. Write a sentence. Ah, too big. Write one word. Okay, I got it. Right. So it's breaking it down. If they're having a hard time getting started on that first step, that's usually why we need to break down that first step. A great strategy that we can really teach with this breaking it down into steps is backward planning. Start with the end goal. So maybe it's being dressed, and ready to go at the door at 8:15 to get out the door. So again, having a picture of what that looks like, right? Including everything they need from their backpack, what they need in their lunch kit to their teeth, right? Then we're going to work backwards. Identify each small step. So put on shoes, pack backpack, brush teeth, eat breakfast, get dressed, wake up. So we're going to kind of go backwards. And even within that, there's going to probably be different steps that they need to really think about, right? Brushing teeth, who knows? Maybe they do need to think about get toothpaste, get toothbrush, put toothpaste on. Maybe it needs to be that granular. Maybe not, for sure, including those steps that they maybe forget. I know a lot of kids who don't rinse the toothpaste. They just swallow the toothpaste. So maybe then you would add that step in if you needed to. We get granular until it becomes so automatic that they don't think about it. But if you are reminding them, that's probably a step that they need to do. So we do this backward planning, right? And then, even getting dressed, there's probably a choose clothes, but maybe choose clothes is the night before. So we're planning backwards and then we're executing forwards. Okay. So maybe to help with that, you take a picture of every step that they take one morning, right? So getting them doing every step, and then you can kind of put them into, a visual sort of flow chart or a written flow chart, or maybe it's a procedural checklist, whatever is going to work for you and your kid, right? That's going to be the big thing. Or in the classroom too. We can do this in the classroom. This is helpful for anything. It could be getting ready. It could be for a chore. It could be for an academic task. It can even be for a social situation. It could even be emotion regulation, right? Like the steps I can take when my brother makes me mad, right? Or the steps I can take if I start to feel overwhelmed in class. So again, creating, some sort of flow chart or checklist, that can be really helpful. Having communication phrases that I can use. If this happens, then this. I used to do that a lot when I did a lot of behavioral therapy with parents or with teachers. I would have these behavioral flow charts. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. And then if this happens, do this or this, right? So just creating that can be really helpful. So we have that foundation, clear expectations, we break it all down, and now we want to help them develop some self-coaching phrases to help them just keep going, to maybe to get started and then to keep going to the end. A lot of my kids really benefit from scripts for that self-regulation. So they're these inner coaching voices that help them stick with their goal when things get tough. It's like their inner Jiminy Cricket, right? Them coming up with their own self-coaching statements is really important. So maybe it's like, I can do one small thing first, right? I've got this. I usually like to incorporate mindfulness and grounding tools just to support the moment to moment awareness to help them, pause long enough to remember the goal. What am I doing? Oh yeah, why? Oh yeah. Okay, keep going, right? I want my iPad. I want my iPad. I want my iPad. Or it's just like the little train who could. I can do it. Or I can't even remember. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can, right? So whatever is going to help them with that motivation piece is going to be really important. We want to be really proactive because self-regulation doesn't mean that everything's going smoothly. Just because we do these steps doesn't mean it's going to go smoothly. So a huge part of success is being proactive about thinking about what could go wrong, what could get in the way, what could go sideways, what could make you frustrated or overwhelmed, or what could make you want to give up. What makes this hard for you usually? What might happen if your brother bugs you again? What's going to distract you? What will you do if you forget a step or if you get frustrated or make a mistake? So, making a plan, come up with some of those common triggers that can make things go sideways, the things that could get in the way. And then these are things that I could do. So, again, that flow chart can be helpful. If this happens, this is what I'm going to do. So, always write it down just to have that sort of visual space. It can be really helpful. And then rehearsing it. That's where this cognitive flexibility really helps starts to grow. And then finally, we got to go test it out, right? Let's go test out the plan. Let's see how it goes. And then we're going to check in and we're going to reflect on the experience, right? So now we're going to incorporate some formative self-evaluation, right? So we can ask what went well, what was helpful, what supports were beneficial, what was hard, what was not helpful, what helped you keep going, what's the one thing that you would do differently next time. I really like using scales of from 1 to 10. So at the beginning, that can be really helpful. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is it going to be? Right? How successful do you think you're going to be? If it's low, okay, well, it's a two, but it's not a one. So two, well, what already do you think is going to be easier? What already are you confident with? But what can we do to bump it up a notch? Right? And then afterwards, too, we can focus on growth. What can we do to help support you, or what can you do differently to bump it up your success one more notch for next time? Right. So we want to just kind of make sure we're talking about that there's learning happening. And you can see that it does take a lot more work. It is hard, but nagging all the time is hard too. And if we're nagging all the time, we're just creating dependency traps because they're always going to rely on us to nag them to remind them what to do. So to develop this independence and them taking it on, yes, there's a lot of work to be done, but this is where that automaticity and that independence starts to grow. Now, if the plan doesn't work, we really want to normalize that. Of course it didn't. Like the first time, yay, now we know that that doesn't work. Let's try another one. I want them to fail as quickly as possible so we can figure out what does and doesn't work as quickly as possible, right? So we want to normalize that mistake. Yes, perfect. Now we know that's not the way to do it. So what do we need to readjust, right? So really focusing on that learning piece, and we're making movement. We're one step closer. We're one step closer. So the focus really here is on flexibility and that forward moving. That's important. So we're not focusing on the outcomes. We're not focusing on a perfect process, but we're working on the process, one step forward. That's where we want to go. Now, the work, of course, is actually helping kids build the self-regulation framework, build that emotional resilience, build healthy relationships, build their overall well-being. Really, that's where we're going. And so the process is one of supported autonomy. So we're building that independence, but it's supported. We're not standing over them, nagging them, because that creates the dependency trap. We're there to support, right? We want them to take over the reins. We want them to be driving here, especially more and more as they start to build the skills, they build the confidence, the belief that they can figure it out. So the next time a kid is stuck, next time they're falling apart, next time they're maybe avoiding a task, we need to pause and ask ourselves, do they know what's expected? If they know what's expected, and I mean everything through and through, do they understand the expectations? I teach at the graduate level, graduate adult learners, and most of the time they don't know what's expected. And so then that can create conflict. So we got to make sure, do they understand what's expected? Then, if they do they have the skills, whether it's to get started or to stay committed through to the end, and not even just committed, to be able to be successful to the end? Do they have a plan for what might go wrong? If not, if you don't know the answer to any of those, or if they can't do any of those, that's your invitation to step in, to help coach them, not to fix, it's to coach them to help build this framework. So I'll leave it there for today. There's lots to think about. As always, I will have some homework for you to check out in the show notes just to help break this down a little bit more. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. But we really want to start building more and more of these frameworks. That's what a lot of our kids are missing. And like I said, we can have it in any part of their life, whether it's academically, socially, emotionally. So, thank you for tuning in. If this episode sparked any ideas, definitely share it with anyone else that you think might be appreciative, or, who might find it helpful. Help those kiddos be bold and courageous, and I will see you next time.